Shuda, and I am known as a parent coach who gets results. And today what I hope to do is to give you results about how to pry kids away from electronics. And I want to begin today by sharing a story with you about a couple that I worked with. And their names are Ron and Sophie. And Ron and Sophie, they realized, you know what, we're yelling at our kids a little bit more than we would like. And so they hired me as their private parent coach. And so when we looked at that, what we found was the kids weren't listening to them the first time that they told them something. Does anyone else have this concern? It's the most common parenting problem in America. And I do have another presentation I can come back to on that topic. However, when we investigated a little further, what we found out was that part of the reason they were yelling was that their oldest son just would not get off electronics. He was just glued to them. And he'd just have a big hissy fit whenever they asked him to get off electronics. And so that was one piece of our work then, was to develop a plan for this family to make that transition off of electronics a little bit easier for their son. One of the things we found was that Mom wanted to limit the use of electronics. She was a pediatrician, she knew the research, and she just believed that was really important. And so she wanted to limit it to maybe an hour a day. Well, Dad loved his electronics. And he's like, no way, because if we're going to curtail some of the use our kids use on electronics, I'm going to have to cut back on my use. And he did not want to do that. So as you can see, it's always a problem when Mom and Dad disagree, especially to that degree, about a topic like limiting media use. So the first step, of course, was to get them on the same page. And that's what we did. And then we came up with a program which I'll share with you as we go through today, so that it was crystal clear to their kids what the rules were, what the transition was going to be, and what the consequence was going to be, in fact, if they didn't get off the gadgets in time. And I just want to share, too, a little bit about myself. Just a few things. I've been working with children and families now for 20 years, so I've worked with thousands of parents over the years. And a couple of the highlights include having a radio show called Real Parents, Real Solutions, and that was all about parenting and finding solutions that work for parents. And what I did then was to take 20 of my favorite interviews and I put them together in a book called 20 Great Ways to Raise Great Kids. And some of the information that I'm sharing with you today does come from my book, and it's available if anyone chooses to look at that. And then these are just some of the media that I've been featured on. And in fact, just a couple weeks ago, I was on WCCO TV for one of the Good Question segments, and it was about media use. And there was a really brief study that had looked at children's behavior when families were out at restaurants, and moms and dads were on their iPhones. And what do you think happened to the behavior of kids when their parents were preoccupied? Right down the tubes, exactly. Guess what? More bad behavior, more acting out behaviors, because of course they weren't getting their parents' attention in a positive way, so they were going to seek that in a negative way. And that's just kind of sad to me. I remember being out at a coffee shop in Hayward, Wisconsin, and all 4 family members were on their gadgets. And I kind of thought, what's the point? Wasn't it meant to be family time? But maybe it wasn't for that family, obviously. So enough about me. How many of you work 40 hours a week? Anyone occasionally work 50 or more? Uh-huh. Well, guess what? Kids' media use. Average media use for kids ages 8 to 18 in America, 7 hours and 38 minutes per day for entertainment media, or more than 53 hours a week. So imagine all those hard working days that you're putting in, 40, 50 hours a week. That's how much the average American kid is on an electronic gadget. More time than they are in school. And when you add the media multitasking, so maybe as a kid, maybe I have a movie on, but I'm also checking my Instagram, or maybe I'm on my iPad kind of playing a game. Right? Does anyone have that experience with their kids, multimedia tasking? Absolutely. Then the astounding number is more like 10 hours. And look, this is a 2010 study. I used this source, Kaiser Family Foundation, because they're extremely reliable. But you can imagine that it's even more hours than that now. So that's what we're dealing with. Okay. And I'm not going to be Debbie Downer about technology. Okay. It is needed. It's important in our world. Our kids need to know how to use it. But what I'm here to talk about really is if your child is using it excessively and if you want to rein that in. So let's just do a review of the harm. Some of you might know pieces of this, and so I'm just going to put together in a capsule so you get the idea of why are we doing this? Why is it important to think about this topic? So one reason is childhood obesity. Any guesses why? Please share. Couch potatoes, exactly. Very sedentary activity when a person is on a media device, isn't it? Also what we have, sometimes we have mindless eating while people, this is us too, are watching TV, and you're not paying attention to what you're eating, so you eat more of whatever it is. And another reason is because of the ads for food products that largely have sugar in them. And so kids then come to become knowledgeable about those products and they want those products. So that's a concern. A culture of disrespect. Has anyone watched a Disney show lately? Or a primetime TV family show? Please tell me, how are parents represented? Yes?
Usually buffoons.
Usually buffoons. Absolutely. If there are even parents involved at all, right? The Cosby age is gone. Leave It to Beaver is gone. And what you find is very, very disrespectful. Parents are portrayed as buffoons. And if you look at the number of hours that kids are on those gadgets, I mean, it's like a tsunami wave of disrespect coming toward them that we have to counter. So if there's more back talk, like does anyone, did you back talk to your parents before you were a teenager? Did you ever even think of doing that?
Not in front of them.
Not in front of them, exactly. Exactly. But what do we face now? Lots of backtalk and disrespect from our kids as parents. Sometimes that's seeping into the classroom and with other adult authority figures. That's part of the reason why. Exposure to over 1 million ads per year, parents. Fun, easy, now, full of possessions. That's the content, that's the message that the advertisements are giving your kids. Everything has to be fun. It's easy. Buy now. And you are nothing unless you have the latest gadget, correct? I'll never forget, I was carpooling with 7 girls exactly in my van going to a high school football game. And it was just before the advent of the iPhone 5S. Every girl in that car was talking about the features on the iPhone 5S, fingerprint identification, and they knew all of the features. And the next day, my daughter shared with me, at lunchtime, there was just like this hush as everybody kind of uploaded and downloaded and, got the new gadget and then came to school with the new gadget. And that just stopped me in my tracks, and I thought, oh my goodness, what incredible marketers, Apple are to have, all these kids know all the features just right off the top of their head. So that's the tsunami that we are fighting, over 1 million ads per year. And a loss of sleep. Particularly if a child has some type of, like a TV in their bedroom or a computer, we find typically about an hour less sleep a night for those kids, and over a third of kids in the U.S. have TVs in their bedroom. But what we also find is that the light in those gadgets messes up the release of melatonin, which is in our brain and tells us it's time to start settling down, it's time to start going to sleep. And also, if they're playing a video game and such, that's really activating their brain circuits at a time when we want them to be calming down to fall asleep. This is the one that made me make some changes in our family. I learned this at a seminar last year, and I'm going to share it with you. There's a researcher called Dr. Gary Small out at UCLA. And what he found is that the part of a kid's brain that is responsible for social cues and empathy is actually shrinking when kids overuse electronics. Okay? Empathy and the ability to read social cues reducing in our kids. Why do you think that is?
Because there's only so much room in the brain, and the electronic part expands, and so the empathy interaction part shrinks.
Yes, exactly. So they're connecting more with machines, and then those are the neurons that are fired get wired. There's a saying in the psychology world about that, right? And so the neurons that are being fired around using electronics are the ones that are getting wired. But if they're spending that many hours a day with a gadget, guess what? It's a lot fewer hours interacting with people, right? And what they're finding even now is that kindergartners don't have, not all of them, but a percentage of them, do not have the ability to look at a person and think, oh, that person's sad, or that person's disappointed, or that person wants me out of their body space, because they haven't been trained, just in the natural setting. And so Columbia's actually developed, ironically, videos to train kids how to read those social cues. To me, that was really alarming. And that's when we began to make some changes in our family. So I noted Dr. Gary Small at the end in the resource area if any of you want to look more into his work. And he has a book, I believe it's called iBrain, that describes some of that. A contributing factor to aggressive behavior, American Academy of Pediatrics says there is extensive research that shows a causal relationship between the media violence that is viewed and increased aggression, attention issues. Kids will have more nightmares, and they believe that the world is scarier as a result of watching violent videos. A numbing to violence. American kids, by the time they're age 18, just from TV alone, will have watched 16,000 murders and over 100,000 violent acts. Just TV alone, doesn't even include video games. Links to attentional problems. There's research out of Mayo Clinic that proves that. They said that especially there's a link between the video games and attention problems. Do any of you know preschool teachers, kindergarten teachers, first grade teachers? I would like you just to ask them, how easy is it to capture these kids' attention now? Especially if you have someone that's been teaching 20 or 30 years. They'll tell you it's very difficult because kids are used to fast action and being entertained. And it's really hard to keep a 5 or 6-year-old's attention in the classroom. Links to early sexual experiences, because they're seeing it everywhere. It's pervasive. It looks like the thing that needs to be done, so I need to be doing it too. That's the social message that kids are receiving. Higher incidence of cyberbullying if kids are online more. Just because they're online more, strictly the number of hours that they're on, but also the occurrence gets higher. And behavior problems, and this research comes from the Mayo Clinic. More social problems, emotional problems, and behavior problems, increased aggression as well. So, not to bum you out at all, just to show you why this is important, and I'm so glad that you're here.